Welcome back to Taking Stock, where we get to talk to experts in our small business community about the common challenges they are facing in their business and how to solve them in a way that leads to better business, more productive teams, and stronger communities. As always, I'm your host, Deke Bowman, head of product here at Cobble. We're back with Javan Lapp and Zeke Harnish to dig more into what work they've done implementing Lean and Kanban and how they've been able to build out their processes and technology to support their team as they serve their customers. Welcome back. We're here with Javan and Zeke again, and we're going to dive into the topic of lean or lean manufacturing and what that looks like. So let's dive in. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of implementing lean, can you give me a brief overview of what lean is, or how do you define it? It's kind of one of those things I think people just toss out as like, oh yeah, of course, you know what lean is, right? And the word that nobody defines, or the acronym that nobody defines.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different interpretations of what lean is, and I would argue possibly a lot of misconceptions as well. Lean's often seen as sort of something that's meant to drive costs out of operations, and not necessarily a kind of a holistic look at a business or business strategy, which I think is a mistake. For me, lean is a systems approach to delivering customer value that engages your people in continuous improvement. So it means challenging yourself and your processes to get better at delivering what customers want when they want it.
Yeah.
And that's key. So it means staying on your toes to deliver a competitive advantage in serving customers. You got to set your people up for success in creating and delivering that value.
Yeah.
To me, that's key. You got to have a willingness to think differently too.
Yeah.
Think differently, try new things, especially to speed up value delivery. Or value velocity, I like to say, to the customer. And that sometimes those things include kind of radical ideas in terms of limiting work in process, limiting batch quantities, and building systems that don't need a lot of handoffs or excessive inventory for kind of like just in case scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a lot there that's interesting. But one of the things I want to pull our key in on is you have to be willing to step back and reevaluate that idea of this is a learning process as much as it's not you're not pulling a tool out of a toolbox and applying it to a wrench to a bolt. Can you just maybe even share a little bit about how you experienced that, or when was your inflection point where you were like, oh no, I'm the problem?
Yeah, I mean, so many times. So many times, like you said, lean does have sort of traditional tools that have been used, developed by companies that have been implementing lean. Talk about SMED, single minute exchange of dies, trying to reduce die change over time. Talk about just in time and Kanban and all these different tools that get used. But implementing these tools doesn't help at all if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And I've certainly made that mistake a few times too, where hey, here's a great idea. I think it can help, but we didn't actually point it at the biggest problem we had at the time. And as I grew and got more responsibility in management, I also realized that many times I was the bottleneck. I was the thing holding the team back because I wasn't creating enough clarity, or I wasn't clear enough in the vision of where we're going. And we made some attempts at implementing some lean tools and some lean process improvements before we were really good at communicating where we're going and what future state is. And that was like playing whack-a-mole with our processes. It was like, oh, this is the problem. No, this is the problem. Well, this is the problem. And everywhere you went, it was like, oh, we made some incremental improvement, but didn't feel like we actually made any overall progress.
Yeah, that seems like your definition of lean clarified, because when you think about it as a system and you're thinking about it as a methodology of increasing your value delivery, then it's way bigger than a tool. And that maybe gives you the ability to step away from whack-a-mole and more of a...
Yeah, that's why I say it's a systems approach. It's really based on systems thinking, and lean was developed, by a lot of industrial engineers. And so there's really this understanding that if we build good systems, then we'll be able to get better outcomes. And if we don't like the outcomes we have, we need to go back and reevaluate our systems. And so getting all your people engaged and saying like, hey, we need a better system, we need a better process to get better outcomes is key. And then if you can build those processes so that you don't have sort of the cognitive load on everybody.
Right.
Many times when you're operating a production facility, if you sort of just rely on tribal knowledge, which is often what I found in traditional manufacturing, tribal knowledge, or really good operators who kind of know everything and play hero all the time and save the day with getting the orders through the plant. There's a lot of cognitive load. They have a lot of things they need to worry about. And what you don't have happen is sort of this day by day improvement on the processes and the systems that deliver results.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is as we went through that transformation, like it was interesting how prior to building these systems that allow the business to scale and support the growth of the business and the customers, is that there's individuals that were highly valued really struggled with stepping into that structured, systematized process because they thrived in that chaos of always reacting to the next thing that was happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask what it seems like the curse of exceptional people, those people that can like bounce between things that are very good at context switching fast. That's a hard problem that a lot of companies or industries deal with. Right? Sometimes we deal with this at Cobalt. You have somebody who knows a lot and they get pulled in 12 directions and they become a bottleneck or people become too reliant. How did you deal with that?
So whenever possible, we tried to kind of retool, reutilize those folks in a way that could best use their strengths, which often meant supporting multiple operations in a support function. Kind of became shop floaters to move around. One example was when we first started implementing Lean, we realized that we didn't have the right org structure or people structure, and we had basically 25 people in a shop reporting to one foreman. And that person was the one who everybody came to with issues and problems. And we realized, hey, one of the structure tools we need to go to is we need to have team leaders that are leading teams of 5, 6, 7 people. And these team leaders need to understand what needs to get done every day and be able to check on quality and train their people. But they're not management. They're more like team captains. And we didn't have that structure before. And so what we did is we went to this person who was a foreman who was basically doing that job for the entire shop, and we said, you're our first team lead and we want to make 4 more just like you. And so your job is to help grow these other folks that we're going to have that are going to become your peers, but you're really the one that's most experienced at this. And we need you to help them. So we don't want you doing everything yourself now. We're going to build these other leaders.
That's good. I want to swing back and when did you first get exposed to Lean or become familiar with Lean?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd heard of it casually for a couple of years. When I first got started manufacturing, we were very much kind of a sink or swim culture. You kind of jumped in and you learned how to do things, and it didn't feel like we had a very cohesive way of thinking about manufacturing. And every manager kind of had their own, I'd say, fiefdom. They had their own way of running things. And as long as they delivered results, it worked well. But we were growing as a company, and those were turning into silos, right? We weren't as integrated. It wasn't so much a smaller group of people who all knew each other. It was growing. And so really in about 2016, our business reached a stretching point where our systems and processes were struggling to keep up with our growth. And the way that showed up was that we were struggling to meet customer expectations. Our lead times were getting longer. We were missing delivery dates. Our people were stressed, and it felt like they were all working really hard, but we weren't getting these results. And we'd introduce these complexities into our system as we grew. And our owner at the time was feeling like there was something missing to help us go to the next level. And talking with other business owners and touring some of their operations, he was introduced to Lean concepts, and he came back and said, hey, I want to figure out how to do this. And I was part of the team who kind of got assigned to say, like, hey, go figure out what we got to do to implement Lean. And at that point, it was kind of, hey, our operations need to flow better. We need to get better results to customers. And as I dove into it, I realized no, actually, like we need a whole culture change. Like it's not just that our operations need to flow more efficiently. Like our information systems need to work differently. Our decision making needs to work differently as an organization. We got to create clarity, and that's really kind of how I got introduced to it originally.
Yeah, that's great. Zeke?
So thinking back to that time frame about when we started implementing lean, I was still in IT at the time. So we went through a series of different book studies. I think that was really helpful in introducing the team to kind of the philosophy behind like respect for people. And started laying the foundation for thinking about like how do we set people up for success in the job they're doing, and then how do we get people to work together towards a common goal. We also sent many teams to what's it called, TCCS?
Yeah, Toyota's training that they do.
Okay.
In Georgetown, Kentucky, and they had one in Maine as well too. And that was a really great opportunity to kind of hear from somebody who's done it well for many years.
Yeah.
It was really helpful for those team members that were kind of those hands-on learners, and the execution process. So, I remember there's book studies. We went through the Toyota way. We went through Toyota culture.
Okay.
And those two were really instrumental, I think, for middle management and thinking about like how do we get people to bring ideas to the table to improve their job, versus constantly working around the obstacles and the problems that were coming up every day.
Good. Yeah, one thing I remember from the training at Toyota, my first training at Toyota on the Toyota production system, was that they stressed 4 core values, and I think he really did a good job of maybe their definition of lean, and that is respect for people, customer first, continuous improvement, or they say Kaizen mindset, which is a Japanese word for continuous improvement, and shop floor focus. And I think that shop floor focus was probably the one on that list that most surprised me. And I think one that ended up being very instrumental in how we implemented lean in long term. And that is that if we're going to get great delivering value to customers, we have to make sure that the shop floor works to deliver that value. And so that helped us kind of create an understanding that inside the company, we have internal customers. And the job of management and the job of the office and admin staff is to make sure that the shop floor workers, the ones that actually handle the value that's created for the customer, are set up to do their job and set up to succeed. And I think that fundamentally helps set our culture up because I think in some traditional manufacturing companies, you kind of get the sense that everybody on the shop floor works for the folks in the office. And there's this really unhealthy dynamic that develops. And we worked really hard, and Zeke leading IT was kind of the star example of this, was that we all realize we're overhead. And if we're not helping make the people who are producing product going out the door of the customer, if we're not helping make their job easier and better to delivering that end, then we're not doing our jobs.
I worked really hard at the back office, especially in IT, to find the tools that actually spoke lean in the language that the IT team could understand. So like referencing the Lean IT book that we talked about in the last podcast, but we dove into Scrum. There's a book that was really impactful. I forget what it was called. But it was actually a book that I recommended to Rodney Spoker and Mike Spelsus to read. And but it's really around this concept of like IT is meant to be this partnership in the organization, helping people being successful in the work that they're doing. So as the manufacturing teams went through this journey of changing how they're thinking about how they approach their work and do their work and building systems and tools, IT was also going through this journey as well too, about changing their perspective of not only just being a technical expert in the organization, but also being a team that provides tools and resources to help manufacturing be more effective and efficient at what they're doing.
So it's clear you all went down the lean path and that you all became sold in it. When you first stepped into it, was it like instantaneous, like, oh yeah, this is the thing? Or were there points where you're like, I'm skeptical. Is this just another seminar that makes its way through the business community that pulls us in this direction and yields similar results? Or yeah, what was the thing that sold you, and what were the things that made you skeptical?
Yeah, so I mean, I was tasked with going and implementing lean, and one of the best things I did was I went and I learned from Toyota directly. So doing that, I feel like I didn't experience lean as just like a seminar, do these couple things and we're good to go, like
Yeah.
like some sort of fad in management. I felt like I was introduced to a dynamic platform and way of thinking that was looking at the business holistically, but that there were different ways to implement it, different things to focus on. So that definitely helped, I think, in it being something that I was sold on and felt like would deliver what we were looking for, which was a comprehensive way of approaching our work, rather than sort of having everybody thinking about their work in their own way. I think the moment in which I kind of got skeptical was the time we implemented, tried to implement our first stab at just in time. And what that looked like was that we had our production teams stop working once they had the next day's orders done.
Oh.
And what was happening before is every part of the plant would work kind of on their own. And so some of them would be a week ahead, some would be a few days ahead. And we were struggling with this issue of there were a couple of bottlenecks in the operation that we weren't able to see and identify right away. And so we had orders that weren't making out the door, but we had parts of orders all throughout the shop. And so when we said every part of the shop needs to work on tomorrow's orders and then stop, it was a radical change, and it felt like we were pulling the ripcord. Because what if we don't get the next day's orders out? But what we quickly saw was that we were able to get that labor, and it took work to learn how to reallocate labor, move to different areas. We were able to reallocate that to the bottleneck. We were able to see where the bottlenecks actually were. And at the end of the day, we realized we actually don't need a lot more people. And at that point, everybody thought the problem was we don't have enough people. And we need to go hire more people because, look, we're not getting orders out the door and we all feel busy. And when we learned to actually see what needed to get done, and for the first time, rather than just this constant barrage of we got this order from the customer, send it out to the shop, and we started to actually put that gate in place that said, okay, we're only going to release the next day's orders. And then when that's finished, the next day we'll release the next day's orders and we'll work it that way. It did feel radical for a moment. It did feel like, I don't know, we might have just made a big mistake.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. It's almost like a requirement. My recollection, and maybe the question is, what are some of the key steps of lean? What are the things you have to do as you're implementing a lean method, lean system? And it seems like it's implementing the pull method. You're pulling it to, not jam to you.
Yeah, there's a part of our lean transformation where we worked very hard to change fundamental beliefs about how we approach running manufacturing.
Yeah.
And creating flow, product, and building and quality were two key pieces of that. I mean, they're key pillars to Toyota's strategy around manufacturing. So I think we'll get into this a little bit later, but our transformation that we went through the summer of 2022 is when we really took that leap towards that continuous flow in manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good time to ask, how do you paint the picture? What did the environment, what did the process look like before? And what were some of those pain points you felt in that helped that? And then we'll dive into the after. And that'd probably be a good time for you to highlight your change in that process, Zeke. So yeah, paint the picture. What was the before state? What was your flow, your backlog, lead time?
Well, where we started, we very much did not have any sense of flow of product. It was, here's the area where this got made and then this got made. And each work center essentially got its own schedule, got its own flow of product. So call it information, right? Stacks of paper. Here's the orders that need to get made. And here's a ship date on them. Make sure you get them done before that. And some of them were piling up inventory, and some were restocking certain most used components to put it on the shelf. But every area of the shop kind of worked differently. And so to pull product through the shop, you kind of had to understand that and understand how each person ran their part of the shop. There were some real strengths of that, but as we grew, that became a very hard system to bring people into, to train people, and to ensure that our customers were getting what they were expecting every time. And so that was part of the before. So I'd say, that was a system that required a lot of inventory for just in case scenarios. And so we had very bloated inventory. We had high working capital requirements that we were able to drastically reduce once we made big improvements. We also had to throw labor in a lot of places where we did not have good processes in place. It wasn't clear where that was. And so over time, we were able to reduce the amount of labor required, both on the shop floor and in the office, because we had to make production scheduling work. Because one of the most difficult things to make shop work the way we wanted it to was we had to get the right information to the right people. And so we started with a scenario where every part of the shop kind of got their own information signals. And we worked very hard to, how do we go to flow of product or pull instead of push, so that we can send the information and the material out that needs to be made at the start point, and it's going to flow through to the end. And we don't need to send, a bunch of extra, information in at each point in the process. So that was a big change for us, and that definitely led to us being able to streamline. Our people were able to be more productive. They were able to know what to make next without a lot of digging or a lot of, hey, we think we're doing the right thing, but then our manager comes and says, no, I need that first. So it really created a lot more stability in the shop. And I just remember at one point looking out at the shop floor, and everywhere I looked, there was like 2 or 3 people like holding a piece of paper, looking at some product. And there was work in process everywhere, like between stages in manufacturing. It was like everybody was looking like, where's that product I need to make? Is that the product? Is that the one? Is that the right stuff? And it was, like I said, groups of people looking for stuff. And I was like, that cannot be where we end up. And so as we built the system, we reduced a lot of that. Although we don't ever have to go looking for something, but it's a lot less than what it used to look like.
Yep. We used to have, as we actually still do today, but carts that product would sit on to kind of flow through the building, because our product's heavy, and we do it in generally batches of 22 and 44. And prior to this changeover, we had north of 50, probably close to 60 of these carts holding product flowing through the plant. And we have more than reduced that in half, if not more, than the number of carts we have in the building. And so much so that we've removed enough carts that we've been able to add new production lines in the building to further increase the output of the facility as well too.
So that's the definition of reduce your working process, because every cart is whipped in that plant.
Yeah.
And so it was just taking up surface area, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And by also doing that, it was creating confusion.
Information flow was a big bottleneck for us, because in between each work center, when the work center finished their order, that paperwork would have to travel back up to production control to close it before the next work center could start their work. So you almost had to have that large whip in process so teams didn't run out of work in the time that it took to process and close paperwork to keep inventory accurate, even though inventory wasn't accurate.
That's quite the zigzag.
Yeah.
So transformation. That's just it. You have carts everywhere. Your collections of people looking for things. Your demand you're growing still. So you have demand I assume your lead times are increasing, and pressure from customers is increasing. what changed?
So we went on a kind of create clarity around like we need to create flow. And we really that the right person has the right thing at the right time.
Yep.
And July of 2022, we hit this wall of I think our backlog was out 12 weeks.
It's pretty far.
At one point, I think we were close to 20 weeks.
Okay.
I ever remember us expanding on our reports out to 24 weeks because our backlog was so large that they couldn't do planning.
Oh no.
Because they didn't have visibility to the entire backlog. But we went through this, set this goal to kind of create flow, start removing all those touch points, reducing the amount of WIP that was in the value stream. So we went from scheduling each cell in the manufacturing environment to implementing master production scheduling, where we scheduled the last cell in the value stream. And upon implementing the master production scheduling process, the trigger for work would be when a cart moves, then the next person does our work. So when a cart gets empty, that cart goes back to the beginning of the value stream. They pull the next cart, and then it goes in the value stream and flows through the process. So we no longer had those connection points back to production control. We were significantly able to reduce the WIP in the value stream. Part of that time too, we had a break between the fabrication powder coating cells and the packing cells.
Yeah.
We had an inventory of powder coated components. And one of our big struggles that we had was that inventory did not always have the right inventory in it for what the customer was ordering. So then we were creating these large manufacturing batching large quantities of product together to replenish there's buffers, that powder-coated buffers, so packing could fulfill the orders that the customer needed. The problem with that approach was that powder coating never had a line of sight to the customer. So they never knew, powder coating fabrication never knew what they were making was what the customer actually needed. They only knew what they were making was what was empty on the shelf. So in July, we completely removed that inventory buffer. We actually left it down. We told the teams we're not going to use it anymore. And that way we could create line of sight from packing and shipping the whole way back to the beginning of the value stream, be able to say, we know what we're making is actually exactly what's needed for the customer. So we went through this process of implementing a 3 master production scheduling, which is a 3-phase planning process. The first phase of that is called planning, where you take the sales forecast and you translate that sales forecast into something that's meaningful for the shop floor.
Okay.
So we translated that into number of sections a day and number of posts a day, because we make railing and we make post. And basically we would go to the shop floor and say, hey guys, to meet this sales goal this year, this budget, we need to produce an average of 750 sections a day and 800 posts a day.
Yeah.
And that was allowed us to be able to have that conversation with the shop floor to say, hey, what resources do we need to hit this type of capacity on a consistent daily basis? So that kind of gave us a picture of like, this is a pace the plant needs to run out. This is about a product that we need to produce out of the building. And then every month we go through and look at the actual orders and say, okay, this month, what does that daily number actually need to be?
Yeah.
So we generally had a goal of 750, 800 posts that we know that we needed throughout the year, but that would fluctuate based on seasonality and based on stocking demand, things like that from the customer. And we would have to kind of adjust that number on kind of a bi-weekly, every 3 weeks basis, to make sure that we had the right team in the plant to produce that amount of product, and we have visibility to bottlenecks on machinery and things like that. Yeah. And the final phase of that master scheduling process is called a frozen phase, where the production control team would take that number, saying if we're going to meet customer demand, we need to make this many sections and post every day.
Yeah.
And then they'll actually take the SKUs and say, these are the specific SKUs that we need to make. So implementing that and implementing the daily targets really create a lot of clarity of the floor to know whether or not we were on track or off track to actually meeting customer demand. And it allowed us to get to the place to where we had the right mix flowing through the plant so that we weren't overstraining a certain operation in the plant as well, too.
Yeah.
So in conjunction with implementing that new scheduling process in 2022, we implemented Kanban as well too, which was a trigger of replenishment.
Okay.
So for every skid of product we stored on the shelf, it had a card that had attached to it, and that card regulated inventory levels. So we never made more product than what there were cards, unless a specific order or number of orders came in at one time that exceeded our Kanban levels. And as soon as those cards rotated back into production control, that was a trigger to production control to re-release that product into the value stream to make it. And that also helped systematize that the mix of what we were making was actually reflective of customer demand and not what we thought we needed to make. So the trigger there was when the customer took it in shipping, we went up and made it again.
That's great. So you're essentially making tomorrow's orders every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we did is we drastically reduced the amount of time it took from releasing an order until it was finished.
Yeah.
That was the end result of that system. And while it was scary at first to remove an inventory buffer that was in the middle, like Zeke said, it allowed us to all work closer to customer demand. And actual replenishment of finished goods being shipped. And at first that felt impossible. And in a previous kind of setup with the company, what we weren't ready for it. But at this point, it was the security blanket that was holding us back.
Yeah.
And so in previous kind of scheduling plans, we thought we had to release an order to the shop 2 weeks before it would ship.
Yeah.
And what we discovered is we could shorten that to 3 days. But that required us to be very disciplined about work in process and hitting our targets. But that also allowed us to reduce the amount of people in the value stream significantly through attrition, and it happened over a long process. And we were able to reutilize some of our best players in other places, and plenty of people, got promotions and other roles as the company grew. It's a great thing when you're having demand. But what we saw was that we went from a place where people's daily targets, they felt like they were getting a lot done, but that product wasn't actually getting out the door to the customer.
Yeah.
So we had this scenario before where we had teams who felt like, wow, we set a record. And this actually happened to oneself. We set a record today because, we fabricated more posts than we ever had before. This is fantastic. But those posts are sitting in as work in process and not actually getting completed out the door of the customer. And once we took some of the barriers away to that process and got the information flows and the planning right, and we limited the work in process, we got a whole lot better at moving labor around and making sure that at the end of the day, we're all working to get the product out the door to the customer that they need.
So to put some kind of numbers behind it of the impacts of these improvements, in July of 22, we had 105 people in the plant producing the product. And as we going through this transformation, we specifically felt like, hey, we need a story to tell on the other side.
Yeah.
So I actually had one of our HR team members go around and write down all the names and the cells that they were working in and what their specific job was. And when we came back around to July of the following year, we actually are now running the plant with 65 people versus 105 people. So we saw just in direct labor alone, we saw annualized savings of between $800,000 and $950,000 of realized savings every year from these improvements.
And your productivity went up along the way.
Yeah, and the great news is people's jobs made more sense. They were easier to do. They knew it was impacting the customer, and so all the overtime and the temp labor and the stuff we had to do. in one summer, a lot of seasonal workers wasn't necessary the next year around.
Yeah. And we were consistently kind of capped at like 500,000 out the door every week.
Yeah.
We would have some weeks where, like, if we pushed really hard, we could get 700,000 out the door.
Yeah.
But I mean, today it's like getting $1 million out the door. It's just a normal week for us now. Like,
Wow.
And we can easily, if we need to add some hours and work on mix a little bit, make it more efficient, we can get $1.5 million out of the plant on a weekly basis if the demand is there and we have the right mix.
It's incredible. So I want to ask some technology questions, because obviously I work for a technology company, and this is part of it. And we've kind of meandered all over the lean process, and that's been really good. How can you give like an overview? Where did the technology change? And I think one of the things I even want to, like, because we've talked about this before, is I feel like you all said in the past that you've had part of the old way of doing it had a lot of people in front of computers doing planning and scheduling, and this new flow sounds like that changes, and people are focused on delivering product to customers. So can you talk a little bit more about that, and what was the role of the ERP in this change, and what other technologies you have to build up to make this all work?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened as we implemented ERP and as we grew is it felt like we got more and more people behind computer screens. And there was an element of that that's kind of felt like, well, this is best practices and this is what happens in a growing company. Like we're kind of growing up as a company. We actually have people in office jobs now. The problem with that was, the value-added work, the work that actually gets stuff out the door to the customers, that the customers are willing to pay for, that we do, is not sitting behind a computer screen. Obviously, there's necessary work, and we have great people doing great work there, but it's the shop floor, right? It's getting product out the door. And so we had to learn what's the necessary thing, right? We have very complex systems that require people, that makes tracking inventory very difficult, that makes planning and scheduling very difficult, that isn't necessarily serving our people to the best if we could design a better system. And I remember feeling like we were doing all this work just to get product to move from cell to cell to cell out the door. I think I remember one point saying, like, water should run downhill. Like it feels like we don't have gravity, like we don't have flow here, and we need better systems, and we don't need to see whether inventory is at this stage in the process, because we shouldn't have that much WIP in the first place. And so we started from this understanding that, like, just having more people behind computer screens wasn't necessarily helping our customers if we didn't have the right systems in place. And then we set to work saying, like, okay, what are the right systems? And that's where Zeke and his team did incredible work developing that roadmap of product.
Yeah, so when it comes to technology tools specifically, and Javan alluded to this, there's two areas that we focused on. One was planning and scheduling. And then the other one was shop floor management, like closing production orders, picking orders, things like that. So I'll start on the planning and scheduling side. Like, one of the biggest weaknesses that we had in creating flow from an ERP standpoint is that the ERP would only show us what we needed in big buckets. It would not show us, like, let's say that, I'll use an example. Let's say our 6-foot American text box section is one of our highest moving products. The ERP could not tell us of 1,000 on order, how much of those need to go tomorrow, how much needs to go the following day, how much needs to go the week after that. Like, we weren't natively able to break down, like, how much we needed every day. And since that visibility wasn't there, the way the schedulers would produce is they would create large batch quantities of product at one time, whereas we might only have needed 10 of them for this week, and not another 100 till next week, and another 500 to the week after that. So we had to build the IT tools to create the visibility of what order do we need things, and what order did the customer order it, so that we could actually create daily schedules instead of creating weekly or larger schedules. So when we think about our fabrication teams and we think about our powder coating teams, since we were all able to create these larger batches and schedules, we would only do prior colors in a sequence. So we do custom colors. We have, I don't know how many different colors, but we would rotate through that every day. And if we didn't get the whole way through the colors, then we would say, hey, we'll try to get to it tomorrow. And oftentimes we didn't get through all the different colors we did. So we are consistently pushing and low moving colors because we were doing such large batch quantities. So the problem we had to solve there with the scheduling tools and the planning tools was great to get to a daily schedule that created clarity for the shop for what needed to be made every day for tomorrow's shipments or the next day's shipments. And then on the production floor side with the mobile apps that we designed, we wanted to get people away from the computers, and we wanted to get individual cells away from being in the ERP, looking at what should they be doing next or trying to discern what they should do next. So we created handheld scanners to be able to close production orders. And then we also created a new reports that actually what we called like a single-use traveler for custom jobs that had everything in that packet that the operator needed, so they didn't actually have to go in the system to look for anything that they needed. So we significantly reduced the amount of times that team leads and operators were spending behind computers searching for information, just by making sure that when the cart showed up, it had the information there with the cart that they needed to produce that product. So the mix of those two things contributed significantly to our reduction in direct labor from 105 to 65. We also turned a production scheduling team of 7 into a team of 2. And with the addition of an inventory person that kind of jumps back and forth and helps where needed.
So is it fair to say that the role of the ERP changed in that it was a platform by which you extended off to build the tools you needed to solve the specific problems? And to go back to your people, process, technology theme, you adapted the technology to solve jobs that need to be done, as opposed to inserting Lego block and saying, well, this is how the Lego block thinks, or this is how it's supposed to be done. We'll do it that way.
Yeah, and we had built our processes in the ERP around these sort of very discrete kitting processes. It went back when we were a shop that did different things in different corners of the building.
Yeah.
And so we had this issue of all these different batches that needed to be closed. So we had to overcome the complexity we built into our own ERP system. And so, another thing that Zeke's team did was on their mobile apps was make sure that material handlers had pick lists to pick components so that carts would show up with all the things on it for the operators to work. So they wouldn't have to go into the computer.
Yeah.
It was just there. The physical parts were there in front of them. And the teams weren't able to get that product there. So what we were trying to do was we're trying to create a drumbeat, or in Lean call it talk time, that at which we're working, a steady rate at which we're working, and for us to know what's the next thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so we had to find ways to extract the data from the ERP that answered that question, rather than having somebody in the office saying, like, well, I don't want anybody yelling at me, and we're going to need to make it sometime, so let's create this big batch and let's get it made, and then create this process where we're doing a bunch of work that customers don't actually need for another several weeks.
Yeah, that's great. As you all continue to work in manufacturing, and you all have seen other ERPs and seen peers in the industry, what's your understanding of what's out there? What's the cost of changing ERP or adopting a new system versus extending an existing system? What are things people should be looking for as they're evaluating the technology choices they make, or those kinds of pivots?
It's a great question, because we actually went through the process of identifying a new ERP system and then migrating to that new ERP system. And I would say the learning of going through that process is that there are certain industry specific ERPs that I think are good for the business that you're operating, and you want to make sure that you're using an ERP that's focused on the industry that you're working in. But every business has their own unique way of operating. That no Most ERPs are only going to get you 80% of what you need.
Yeah.
And then you need to take the ERP, the last 20%, through molding it to the processes that set up your people for success. So like, as I reflect back on that and our decision to go from EBMS to we selected Epicor, is that we could probably have gone further by getting EBMS that last 20%, than investing the time and resources into actually doing the migration. So great learning process for us. And there was a lot of conversations that went into that. But I would say at the end, like if you have an industry specific ERP and it's there and it's focused on serving your type of business, you probably are going to get the most of that ERP that you can, and that you got to take ownership of your processes and what your people need to be successful, and refine those things to serve your people better.
Yeah. So if I were to say back, one of the things I hear is that if you're running against a wall, is changing the product isn't necessarily going to solve the problem if you don't actually know what the real problems are.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's figuring out how the products you're using can grow with you and be molded or changed on the way. And just to give context, today at Keylink, you all still use EDMS?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens is that people see everything in terms of how the tool is set up, the system's set up. So we used to hear, hey, EBMS has this problem, or EBMS doesn't work, when it was we were trying to use it for something we hadn't designed it for, or our processes had issues, and so learning to say, okay, yeah, we have this ERP and this is a great tool and we work in it every day, but we have it configured to do certain things we don't have it configured to do, and we have to take ownership of our processes. We don't necessarily just work a certain way because that's what the ERP requires. Was something we had to push against a bit.
Yeah, I'd say there has to be a strong focus on simplifying, reducing complexity out of your shop floor processes. Because if your shop floor processes are not simplified and there's a lot of complexity built into them, it's going to make your tools that you need or your expectations of your technology to be complex as well too.
Yeah. For business owners who might be getting started, thinking about implementing lean process or principles or the system, like you've laid out or you all described that you all went through, what are some resources you'd recommend to help them get there?
Yeah, my first recommendation would be talk to somebody who's been going through it. Lean is dynamic. You're not gonna. There are great books out there, and I have plenty to recommend. But you're not gonna learn it from a book, and you're not gonna learn it from a seminar. It is a journey. You have to know what your end results are. You got to be able to get good at connecting people to both strategy and tactics, and embrace the system. Be clear about the systems you need to make your people be successful. Ultimately, that's what the game is.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would say to somebody who's getting started is don't focus on tools or solutions. Focus on solving problems and setting up people for success. Because if you can put the problems and people first, it's going to be you're going to get to much quicker what you actually need tool wise and solution wise to be successful. And then talking to somebody who did it, highly would recommend that. And really focusing on changing fundamental ways of how you think about how approaching work is where I would highly recommend. And just two books that I know, one from the IT side, that I mentioned this one earlier and I forgot the title of it, but it's called The Phoenix Project. And then the other one is The Goal by Ellie Goldratt. Theories of Constraints was a really impactful book. We actually did a book study on that one. That one really helped solidify for us thinking about how to create flow in manufacturing and changing that foundational thinking. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. This has been super interesting. Again, I think we could have a whole series where we talk and learn about how you all gone through this process and journey. So maybe we'll have you on again sometime and learn some more. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you gained some insight into whether or not lean manufacturing is the right step for you or how you might implement it more fully. If you enjoyed this conversation and found it helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We'll keep bringing you practical advice and expert perspectives to help you build a better business and more productive teams and stronger communities. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in a future episode, let us know at marketing@copalsystems.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Deke Bowman, and this is Taking Stock. We'll see you soon.